All right, here we go, ICS 3U, folks. Lesson 1 in Unit 5 on records. Whatever records are, we'll talk about soon. Um, Hopefully you've got a word processing document open. I don't think it necessarily has to be Smart Notebook on this one. I think you can just take the note yourself. But I will go back and forth between this and ready with an example. So be ready for ready. You can have that open if you'd like. Um, So far, we've been dealing with databases strangely. We store all names in one array, album names in another, etc. Sometimes we used a two-dimensional array, but like in the warm-up here, we had a bunch of different video game names and their publishers, and we stored all the names in one array and all the publishers in another array, and we kind of link them together with the subscript, like subscript 0 would be the first name and publisher 0 would be the publisher of that first video game, and then 1 would be another one, and 2. That didn't seem like it was that natural of a thing to do. Wouldn't it make more sense to have name and publisher kind of linked together in what's called a record? And yes, it does make more sense. In an actual database, each file is kept together in a single data type called a record. So we'd have a record of that video game title, and it would have, the video game name, the publisher, how many copies it sold, or whatever else we'd like to keep track of in its record. An example might be a student record. So, for instance, we might have Vandenford, Ferd, and then a number, and then a whole bunch of stuff that all has to do with this one student. Together makes a record. Somewhere on the school network is all of your information, your student number, all your marks, your date of birth, who to phone if you get hurt, all those things. In Java, we refer to a record as a class. And again, this idea of a class is what it's called in Java, and it actually is starting to hint about what you're going to learn about next year in grade 12, the idea of object-oriented programming. But for us, what we want to do is we want to sort of create this idea of all these bits and pieces that are attached to one person or one thing called a record, and that's going to be important. The individual values are called fields. So last name is Vandenford, first name is Ferd, student ID, birth year are all fields. In Java, we often refer to those fields as attributes. So what does this look like? Well, we'll get to that in just a second, I think. Hang on, let me see if there's anything else here. No, nothing else here. It says declaring a record or a database in Java. So we set up the fields and data types we want in the public class record name statement, and between the public class record name statement and the main statement. So what's went on in Ready for the most part, and I'm going to go a new HSA console, and I'm going to call this one Husky. You should do this too because we're going to be using this quite a bit. All the good stuff happened in main. Any variables we used, all the stuff happened in there, and this was the only line that we'd have in between here. But actually, in Java, most of the good stuff happens right here. So for instance, I'm going to make a Husky data type. And in a Husky record, I might want a first name, which is a string, first name. And I might want a string, which is a last name. And I might want an integer, which is the year of birth or something like that. And I can have any number of things that I would want to keep track of as far as a Husky is concerned. Okay? And those are all called fields or attributes. Fields or attributes. We call them attributes. That's more of a Java name for them, attributes. And fields is more like, in general, in computer science, when we're talking about databases, we call these individual things fields. Okay, back to the note. So here we go, and this is what we just did. We went public class Husky. Data type 1 was, we called it a string, and then the field name. So data type are like the variable types. So we had string, we had integer, and the field name are our variable choices, or field or attribute choices. We called it first name and last name, and those are things that we picked. Like those were like variables, but they're actually attributes of a Husky, because we've declared them sort of not in our main method. So this means it's an attribute of this record Husky. Okay. And then in the main method, notice that right now nothing's going on. My program's doing nothing. Say, well, why do this then if it's not doing anything? Well, essentially what this is doing is it's setting up the structure, and we'll see how to use it very shortly here. Just be patient. And it says, and this is part of your note, please get this into your note. It says data type 1 is int or string or whatever other data type we'd like to use. So, names are strings, and date of births might be a integer, or wage might be a real number, or a double, or whatever. Okay, so that's how we sort of set up our fields. Now, how do we use them? So the example timeout I already did. You might want to paste that in there. That's up to you. There was the example we've got so far, and right now if I run it, nothing's going on. It doesn't do anything, right? This is just setting up our structure. So it says before we can actually use our record system, so we've got a Husky record system set up, but we're not using it yet. We need to make objects that will have values for the fields that we've defined, i.e. record name object1 equals new record name. So over on the last slide, we created a class or a record called record name. In our example, it was Husky. And then we had a bunch of data types and field names. This was string first name and string last name, and so on. It says that we need to make some objects. These are some actual records that we can start using. And we can make as many records as we'd like. So let's get back to the example before I go any further. Back to the example. I don't have any Huskies made yet. So if I wanted to make a new Husky, maybe I'll call it student 1. Student 1 is a new Husky. New Husky. And at this point, it actually creates a Husky record. And then I can start assigning values. So then I could say student1 dot first name equals Ferd. And I can say student1 dot last name equals Vandenford, or whatever Ferd's last name is. Vandenford. And I could say, and I assign all these values. And what's neat, I don't have to assign all of them if I don't want to. Birth equals 1998. And if I run it, still nothing's going to happen, because I haven't asked the program to do anything. It does have those values, and I can show you that by printing out some values to the screen. And I'm going to put a space in between there. Student1 dot last name, and it's going to print that out. There it is, dandy. So that worked. Notice that if I were to leave out the student1 part and run it, error. It says it's not static, cannot be accessed in this static context. It's saying, listen, dummy, you need to actually tell me what record, whose record has a first name of Ferd. I know you're talking about this, but you're not telling student, or which Husky rather, has a first name of Ferd. So you have to say student one dot first name, and similarly there. Okay, fine. So I have to have created a record before I can start assigning values. Dandy. We could make as many records as we like. So for instance, we could have a second student, and I could call it anything I wanted to. This is variable names that I've decided. So say here I'm going to make another Husky, and I'll call it Bill. I can call it anything I want to. New Husky. Notice right now Bill doesn't have any values. And so if I were to try and print out, it'd be interesting to see, because I know student 1 has a first name of Ferd, but if I tried to print out Bill's first name and last name, what would it say? We haven't assigned it. So if I run that, null and null. So when I created this Husky called Bill, it didn't get a value of first name, and it didn't get a value of last name. And so when it accessed it here, Java looked it up and said, there's nothing there, so I'm going to print out null. So, well, why didn't it print out Ferd and Vandenford? First name was Ferd and last name was Vandenford. Well, that was because it's a different record. Student 1 was Ferd and Vandenford. Bill didn't have any values, and if I wanted to actually assign some values to Bill, well, then I'd have to do that, like this. And I can assign some. I don't have to assign all of them if I don't want to. Has to be a number, right? Year of birth has to be an integer. And then now, what does that say? Bill.first name. What's the problem? Oh, I missed a quote. Did you guys notice that? Probably you did. So Bill has a first name but no last name, so it still looked up last name and found null for Bill. And notice I can mix and match if I wanted to. I don't know why I would want to do this, but if I printed out the other one, that would work. I can mix and match different attributes. And we could keep going. We could make as many records as we like. We could make, a Bill and a Ferd and a student 1 and student 2. At this point, we'd have spots lined up in memory but no values. And we saw that with that Bill record. And then we start assigning values using that dot notation. Object whatever dot field name, and then I start assigning stuff. Bill dot first name equals Bill, and so on. Okay, and we saw that in our example. I think how much more? I'm going to pick up this slide in part 2 of this video. Okay, ladies and gents.